Yes, so raw data, the #1 superfood for a performance tester. So first of all, Hendrik, thanks so much for this awesome theme, Jurassic Park. Because indeed, when I think about Jurassic, I think about dinosaurs. And my life currently, it's all about dinosaurs. So this is my youngest child, Arden, and the picture is only taken a few weeks ago when it was still summer. That's been quite dreadful the last few days. And there he's sitting playing with his dinosaurs. This boy just loves his dinosaurs. Everywhere where he goes, he takes his dinosaurs. And I think that this Jurassic Park should be about those young fellows, about people getting into performance engineering and just getting into that journey to become a performance engineering, which can be quite complex. So this is Jurassic Me. It was funny that Henrik was talking about cloning because I actually studied a little bit about cloning. So I'm not sure if it's me talking or indeed my clone, because my background is chemical engineering, specialized in biochemistry. So there you go. But in 1999, I got the chance to go to South Africa, to Cape Town, to take part of a boot camp in IT, together with 23 other young people. And that's me in the Cedar Mountains, jumping off a cliff, not sure why. Maybe it was all too much getting into the bits and bytes, but we had a great time there and we learned about the basics of IT, about visual programming, visual basics, about SQL Server. And I actually programmed my first 3-tier application, and that was probably also the last 3-tier application that I actually programmed. So when I returned back to Belgium, I started to work and that was 1999, 2000. I started to work for a big investment bank as a technical tester. Did I know what a technical tester was? It was me together with a lady called Inge, also from that bootcamp of 24 people. So we started as technical testers, and the first tool I was being given was actually LoadRunner 5.0. So there you go. That's where it all started for me. And when Hendrik asked me, Stijn, do you want to talk? Of course, I say always yes, because I love sharing stories with you folks. And he asked me, Stijn, what's that one lesson that you really want to share with us so that can help new people into performance engineering to really learn about something, or maybe performance testers that are doing it for a while? What can they learn from that one topic that can uplift what they are doing? It's funny because not too long ago on LinkedIn, I wrote an article, 25 tips for a performance engineer. Actually, when I first wrote it, was 13 tips for a performance engineer. But you see, things are getting more complex and you learn while you go and you write more tips. And the tip that I do want to share today is actually indeed about raw data. Why is raw data, why do I see it as the superfood for a performance engineer? Why should we all be eating raw data? So in the next coming minutes, I will be talking about what is raw data, and okay, what do you do with raw data? How do you analyze it? And if you look at the raw data, is it only healthy, or do you need to be careful not eating too much from it? So my definition, call it the definition of raw data for a performance tester, is actually the measurement of the response time of every single request as opposed to averages and aggregation. So in your load test tool, when you look at the raw data, it will probably look like this. So you have this timestamp, you have an element, or you call it a business transaction. You have the response time, so the time that it took to respond to the request here in milliseconds. And you see here also in this example, if it was successful or not. Tools like JMeter will also have the response codes with it and even the size of the request or of the response. So wonderful. Oh, dyno time. Let's click on the dyno. Of course, dynos, they always take viruses with them, but I know what this dyno is going to do, so I just accept it. So this is going to open something very special. When I was actually studying a little bit about what I was going to talk, I came across this fellow, and he is called the T-Rex, and we all know the T-Rex. He is very powerful, very mean, and he destroys everything what he sees. But actually, this is a data set. This is a pattern, and you see a dinosaur. And when we select, let's say that we want to look at the X shape, and we want to look at a star, and maybe a circle. So what we see here, and I thought this was really, really powerful to already explain a little bit what the importance is of my talk and why this is superfood. So you have 4 different patterns, but if you look at the summary statistics, so the averages, standard deviation, the correlation of those 4 different data sets that have a totally different shape, yeah, the summary statistics are all the same. And I think that's pretty amazing, because that's not what I expected to see. And actually there are dozens of different shapes, and that's why it's called the Datasaurus dozen. Have a look online, it's actually quite awesome. And so this is by the way, being displayed in Tableau. And I was really surprised with Stephen this morning, because he explained also about Tableau and how to use that for data analytics. So please look at his talk whenever Hendrik finds time to put it online. That was awesome. So yeah, this is actually amazing. So when I go back to my presentation and we go to the next slide, it actually goes back to something that's quite a bit older. It's the Anscombis quartet, and here are also different patterns, but the same summary statistics. So also have a look to the Wikipedia page. Very, very useful to understand why you need to look at patterns and not only at summary of statistics. So bringing this all back, and at the other side, I forgot about it, we are all into DevOps and automating and putting performance testing inside a CI/CD pipeline. And then, of course, somewhere we need to decide, okay, are we going to pause that build? Is the performance of that new release, is that sufficient? So you can imagine when you base your decision if something is good or not good on only statistics. Dinosaur, circle, star. You might take the wrong decision in putting a build live. So that's you need to be very careful with that. So going back to actually load testing. So here you see a typical example of a very simple graph. It's a load test that we ran from 10:54 to 11, very short. You see the response time on the y-axis, and on the x-axis it's the duration of your test. And here you see actually the average response time. I call it the bucket size. So the average has been made over a second. So every second we see what the average for transactions is. And that's my graph. Okay, I've seen plenty of those. I think the performance, I said 95th percentile under 250 milliseconds. It's all tickety-boo, it's all great. But then look at the same graph, but then we're going to look at raw data. And you see, it's the same test, but it's actually using the raw data to visualize the performance, and that's what we refer to as a scatter graph. And if you see this, you actually see something differently. You see something different. You see, and we refer to it as performance tests as banding. Now, what that actually means is that you have different bands. You can actually see that you have 2 or 3 bands. So sometimes performance of the specific transaction is 1400 milliseconds. Quite often it's 400 milliseconds. And then you have a whole lot that's actually like a few milliseconds. But you really, really need to see this to actually understand how the application performs. Because if you look at this, there's no way that you actually can see this. So this is already one example which explains that we really need to look at the raw data and the scatter graphs. And here is another example of a test. It's actually a test that we executed not for a few minutes, for a few days. And we see again that the average response time is 164 milliseconds. This is the average response over the duration of your test. But then going to the next slide, again, the same test, the same data, but it's the raw data. What we see here is that there are the most famous spikes, and yeah, it's not always what you want to see. When you see those spikes, it actually means that here that some end users might have to wait 10 seconds to get a response back. And often an example of why these spikes may happen is if you have a Java application, when you have a major garbage collection, you have the most non-famous stop the world. So your application actually stops from working for milliseconds, sometimes seconds, depending how well your garbage collection is tuned and what the context of your application is. That could be a cause of this behavior. But also whenever this is a problem, as a performance tester, you need to see this. And based on what you see, these patterns, the raw data, you can actually decide, what am I going to do with this? And how do I summarize this? I say that raw data shows you the ugliness of an application. The imperfections are not smoothed out. Sounds a little bit negative, but hey, I think that you get the point. We really need to look at that ugliness. We need to see how is that scatter looking at? What are the outliers? Do I have banding? Do you have spikes? And based on what you see, you can actually take a decision if you need to tune that application or if you don't need to tune it, because not every imperfection needs to be smoothed out. It could be that imperfections are just acceptable for the business requirements that are being defined for that application. But you need to see them to take the decision. If you don't see them, how can you? But how do we do that? It's all good talking about it, but how do you do it, and what do you do with the raw data? Well, load test tool, we all know them. We have talked about that in the previous talks. I call it the prime function of a load test tool is actually to add load to a system and to collect the response times. And there are plenty of different tools on the market, and that list is growing every single day. We just learned about a new tool or an old tool that I didn't know that it exists in the previous talk. Anyway, there are plenty. Then look at a business intelligence tool. A business intelligence tool is the prime function of a business intelligence tool is to analyze data, a lot of data, and to visualize that data. And there are also different tools on the market. But when you bring a load test tool and a BI tool together, you create magic. And because then you actually combine those two prime functions together, and your framework will be so much better suitable for performance engineering. So, real example. If I look at this thing still makes me happy because I would have wished that I had this for many, many years. And you were like, what is this? Oh, here is actually at the current clients, we're running a load test in their live production environment every day at 7 o'clock in the morning, and we run it for 30 minutes. We are lucky because most of the transactions are read-only transactions, so we do know what we are doing. So be careful when you test in production that you really don't impact the real users. If you can, so production may be a really nice environment to do some load testing in. And what we see here, we have done load test every single day for what is it, 60 days or so. And at the top, you see the trend line. At the bottom, you see all those little different dots with different colors. They are actually the response times, raw data of different types of business transactions. And then at the top, you see error and throughput. And at the bottom, you see the percentile graph, which is awesome. And this thing has been, we use also here, Neotys was a load test tool, Tableau has been the data analytics tool. So let me take you through this example. So actually, I want to show you how data and how if you are able to represent it in this way, specifically when you do daily automated testing, that the way that you actually use the data and visualize it brings so much power to your performance testing and actually really uplifts what we're doing. So here we were doing daily testing for a few days, and then we had a release that did go in, and we see that the performance did improve quite a bit. And you see that from the trend line. If I go back, the trend line, also you see the pattern. If you look at the percentiles, and that's why I really like the percentile graph, you see the pattern. So at the right, at the right hand bottom side, you see that also changing completely. And percentile graphs are really good. When small things change, the whole pattern of a percentile graph will change, like you see here. Awesome. But then we had another. What happened after a few weeks? The performance did actually go up a little bit, and then finally, you had that spike on I believe it was on a Thursday, and all up again, and we did have a look what was going on there. And basically what we actually optimized was the cache, but we didn't size it correctly, so the memory of the heap was filling up and was not collected properly. So we had to actually remove the cache at that stage, and that's what we did to avoid out of memory to go back into stability. But if you look at this, so go back, and if you see the total view of this dashboard, and you get this every single day when you wake up, you get a new test and you see that automatically in your dashboard. This is for me amazing. This is what makes me smile. And what it actually does here, it actually makes for me a daily picture of production application performance. It's like, see that sometimes on YouTube when people are taking a picture every single day for the last 25 years, and then you see them growing older. We should actually do that in reverse to see how good we looked when we were young. But anyway, it's a little bit the same, that you really see that change happening, and that you can act whenever you see something that's not acceptable. And here in those dashboards, the raw data is my prime graph, and then I actually create other graphs, customized graphs with Tableau here to actually tell a message. And it's true, a picture is worth 1,000 words. When I was not using Tableau and I was not using business analytics, it was sometimes very hard to actually bring a message across to your stakeholders. And now when you have one graph, it sometimes avoids you writing that beautiful report that I call it of 60 pages. I actually completely stopped doing it, and I report with those graphs, and I actually call in a meeting to explain people what this graph means and how they need to interpret it and to see what the next actions are. So raw data. So I love actually putting more dimensions on the raw data. And with one of the latest versions of Neoload, but I believe it's the same with JMeter and also with LoadRunner, you can actually extract more than just the measurements, more than just the response measurements. You can also extract raw data, custom values in your raw data. And why is this important? Because you can do anything. And you can actually sometimes put error messages in your custom data, or here you can put a client ID in your data. And here again, we have two tests, and you see that sometimes most of the transactions are okay-ish, but sometimes you have transactions that are a little bit slower. You have there one specific one that took more than, around 5,000, 6,000 milliseconds, 5-6 seconds. And in both tests, you see it's actually the same client ID. And you see also the name of the transaction, see the details with that specific client, different times of the day, had the same issue of slow performance. And also in the previous talks, we have talked about the importance of actually using the right set of data, because data is impacting the performance of a business transaction. And actually, referring back to my 20 tips of a performance engineer, this is one that you get for free then, related to the raw data, and here the custom values is actually, when you do a load test, don't use vanilla test data. What is vanilla test data? Test data that you have created to suit your test. Try to use real production data, because it's a complexity of data that actually can have a real impact on the performance of your transactions. As an example, and I think in the previous talks similar examples were given. Say that you're buying stuff on Amazon, and you want to see your sales, your purchase history. Say that you're new to Amazon and you've bought one thing, or maybe you're that guy that's like 75 years old and have used Amazon since day one and has bought more than 6,000 items. When you use that specific person and you go to the sales history, it may take a little bit longer than that new person that only had one item in the that he bought on Amazon. So really, really important indeed to get your test data right when you test, and having it then on top of your raw data as an extra dimension can be very powerful, not only to see it, but also to say that you want to debug this. Actually, then you know which client ID and to use to actually mimic that manually to see also when you don't have load if the performance is bad. So it can be very powerful. Here, it could be my boys Arden's his bedroom full of junk and dinosaurs and stuff lying around. But yeah, there's lots to look at in this picture, and that's the same with raw data. When you first look at raw data, there's a lot to look at, and that makes it also complex. It's not always easy. It's not that you need that is the superfood for a performance tester that is actually easy to eat. It can be quite complex. And an example here, that's the example that I showed you a few slides back. But when we actually look at, when we add the percentile, the 99 percentile, so 99% of all the transactions were less than 471 milliseconds. And for that specific application, this may be just good enough. So what we typically see is with raw data, it shows you the ugliness of an application, but it doesn't mean that you need to solve the ugliness. How much does your client want to spend to solve it if they don't see it as a problem? So always, and that's another free tip that you do get from me, don't lose track of what's required when you're testing. Always look back at your requirements. What am I doing here? And what's required? Because we're all technical. We love to solve technical issues, but some of those issues, those ugliness of an application, they don't need to be resolved. So don't spend a lot of time and money if it's not required for what you're doing there. Cool. So yeah, for me, raw data is the number one superfood for performance tester. If you haven't looked at the raw data, please have a look to it. See how with the tool that you're using, you actually can get raw data. And indeed, listen to the talk that Stephen did, or download Tableau when you get 15 days for free, and imported it. And have a look to how the raw data looks like. And in some tooling, you might also see the raw data. So look at the raw data if it's there. So yeah, now I'm getting a bit scared because a demo is always there to fail. But let's try to actually show a little bit of the magic, okay? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to here, and that's Neoload. So in Neoload, so this is a test that I did for the demo purposes at 9:29 this morning. And how do you now export the raw data? With Neoload is actually really, really easy. You go to the Value tab, and then you have, I call it the most awesome button in Neoload. It's the Export button. I think that Henrik will agree. So we're going to export it, and then we're going to export all the elements, and we're going to go to the raw results, and I'm going to export it over here, and I export it as export. Going to export the raw data into a CSV file. So it's doing the job, all done successfully. You did see 6 there, and the reason there, if we go to the result manager within Neoload, you see that I have done already previous tests as preparation of this demo. The Jurassic 001 till Jurassic 005 was already in my exports, and now we did the extra one. Right, that's Neoload, so go now to the folder with the export over here. So if I go to the export raw data, there is a utility merger.exe, And it's my good friend Joey who quickly developed this. He is an awesome Python developer, and with Python, if you do want to get into automation and you're new to test automation, Python is really a cool language to take up to. I was going to do a course as well, but thanks to beautiful COVID, this course has been declined, so I can't go. So I do need to do it at home, online, which will be fine as well. Anyway, what this little utility does, it's going to merge all those raw data exports, and it's actually just going to put one additional column called run ID. So I'm going to add a run ID T-Rex001 for the first one, T-Rex002 for the second one, T-Rex003, T-Rex004, T-Rex005. It didn't take the last one, but it doesn't matter because I already opened it before. So it will actually create the global results of CSV. And if we open it, it's going to be in the slides. I already showed you the raw data, and you see that we added the run ID to the raw data so that we can actually distinguish different test executions. It's quite common as a performance tester to actually provide a unique value to every run. So when you compare runs, you can do that with a filter on that specific run ID. All right, so close this one. Don't change. So now we are going to go to Tableau. So here, wrong one. When you open Tableau, you see this. And you can connect to different data sources. And here we are going to connect to a text file. And we're going to connect to the global results.csv. So here you see again all the raw data, like it is in the CSV. So we're going to go to our first worksheet. The first thing, and once again, I will talk a little bit quick about all of this, but it will be in my presentation. I have step by step how you need to get into it. And I will also on GitHub, we will have this little utility to merge your files. I will add a Neoload project that I've used. I will put the data. I will put a template of Tableau. So actually, there will be no excuse not to use it, and there will be also quite a lot of stuff on the Neotys website. But yeah, let's look at that magic. So time, I'm going to change the date time to date and time. And what we do then, we are going to drag and drop this on the column section. And I choose continuous time. There you go. And what we see here, we did 5 or 6 different tests. And you will see when I put the run ID on color, you will see different colors appearing. One is T-Rex003 is red. Don't like red because that says to me that it was completely full of errors. So I'm going to make it green. So you can change the colors, which is already nice. So I want to see the response time. I want to see that beautiful scatter graph. I'm going to drag that on the rows, which is over here. And then we see this. And of course, because we did all of those tests on different days, you see this, so not really useful. I see that I've used too many greens, so let's just, what do we not have? Yellow. So how do we do that? So if you go to the x-axis and we double click on it, you can actually say, I want independent access range. If I click on this and I put run ID on the column, bang, I do have that raw data graph, which already looks awesome. So what else can we do? Well, when you do load testing, it's always good also to look at the throughput, at the transaction rate, or whatever you call it. So I'm going to, let's say, duplicate that worksheet. And what I do now is, so here you already see very beautiful 5 different tests. And you see, you can actually very, very easy compare statistics and compare the raw data with if you export it, which I find always really clunky with load test tools when you want to compare many runs. This is actually really nice. So throughput is actually very easy as well. Response time, I don't want to see the response time. I want to see the count. Yeah. And maybe I'm not as interested in the count a second. Maybe here we are going to go and we say, okay, give me the count a minute. So here you see the load on your system. You see that all those 5 tests did not have the same throughput. What you can do then as well is, so those are 2 worksheets. Then I can say, okay, give me a new dashboard. Then you can just drag them and you can create whatever you want. Okay. Power of data visualization is that you can actually do whatever you want with the data. So if you want to show people what the problem is, you need to make a custom graph to show your stakeholders what the problem is. Going to go to another Tableau instance. It's the same data, but the one that this one. Okay, let's shoot data, global results, edit connection, global results. And I go, so it's the same stuff, but like what I've talked about. We talked about this. What you see here is that I actually added the element section on the color graph. So I actually dragged and dropped the element on the color. So you see the different kinds of transactions. You see the throughput again. You can add the maximum. Here you have the 99 percentile, but say that you're interested in the, let's have a look, in the median, which is always useful as well. Put the medium and I say, give me a custom label, computation equals value, and we are dealing with milliseconds. And the same graph will have also the median. Okay, and you see quite a different pattern going from T-Rex 004, T-Rex 005. It all drops and the performance is better for some reason. So you can do whatever you want, basically. You can have the table stats, and then you can actually have an overview where you put everything together. See? Then you can say, okay, maybe I'm interested only in RunID 4 and compare that with RunID 5. And maybe you do want to zoom into the response times above a certain time. You see, you can do or maybe you're not interested in all the elements, or you're interested, you're not all selected, no, they're all selected, but maybe you're only interested in search animals, select product ID. And that the problem there is I haven't defined it as a, let's go and correct this. Run ID element. So what you do, why that didn't work is with the element, I need to say here, apply, and that's a filter in Tableau, apply to worksheets all using related data sources. If I go now to the overview and I select here only the search, you will only see the search transaction. Okay, for me that's very powerful. And if you would like what we have done, we have totally automated this. So we do an automated test in a production or in test environment. We do both. We have created actually a very awesome framework that takes up that raw data, puts it into a database, and does some cool analytics on it, and we hook Tableau on it, and this has all been done in an automated way. So for me, already looking at this, it's completely different than what you see, than what you would see when looking at the load test tool. And also, you see when I hover over it, here you can see that with the custom value is that for the select animal, I selected an element with a specific ID and with a response code. So also here, I added that extra layer of functionality on top of my data. Going back to my presentation. We talked about this, and this is a little bit what we did. So it's important to create, save, and reuse Tableau workbooks as templates. So like I promised you, I will put a template online. So specifically when you use Neolite, that would be probably the easiest when you export your raw data. Export it as global results or CSV, hook it into the template, and you will see all the stuff that I showed to you. But I can also put all the data there so you can have a play with it yourself. Automate and drive it one step further. When I talked about that framework that we are using, that we have created, this is the view that we have. Every day we have here a test execution score, which tells me if the test that we did is very similar to previous tests. It shows me the trend lines, the raw data, the percentiles. I also extract information from the APM tooling to actually see what the averages of Java calls within the application. So this is what makes me happy. It would be really difficult to actually not use this, and how to get to this to here, how to get to see those dashboards is actually start working with the raw data. Useful links. There's a lot of useful stuff online. I added that free, so have a look to it. And that's me. So I'm open to questions. I hope you have a lot. You can connect to me on LinkedIn. I'm not a big Twitter fan, so I don't even have a Twitter account. But I will have a YouTube channel soon. Oh, yeah. Is that you, Henrik?
No, it's not me. I didn't bring my kids with me today.
No, I love kids, so.
No, I have. Yeah, it's you don't recognize it, but it's the voice of Stefan. Stefan Bonnet. In normal day, in normal situation, he has he always sounds like a kid. But, probably jokes. So for that, I need to clap. Oh shit!
Hey, I see Andy is online as well. Ramya and good old friend Joey.
Hey, I see that you. I don't know what happens. You copy my style. This morning I pick up a shirt and everyone is wearing it today. I'm so jealous. I don't get it. It's so good to see you guys. So let's start the Q&A. Thanks, Stijn, again for this presentation. I really loved it, and I think I'm not the only one. So before we start, there is no current questions from the audience, so I'd like to ask directly to Andy, Andreas, Gravner, and Joey if they have any questions. Just to note for the audience, Joey just pushed the link to the GitHub repo where you can find the utility that Stijn used for the demo. If you want to take advantage of the raw data and have the right format, you can use the utility. It's been shared. All right. So, any questions to Stijn?
I do, and I think Stijn, first of all, great to see you again. It's been too long since we parted ways in Greece in February, right before the whole thing went down with the pandemic. But I'm really always I know we always kind of argue and fight about raw data, but you always make it so clear that raw data is just magic because you can see so many things that you otherwise won't see. My question to you, and I think we maybe talked about this in February, but in your last graph where you showed in your REF framework that you're actually calculating a score. How do you do this? How do you calculate the score? Because this is something that I will be talking about as well in my presentation later on, basically trying to calculate a score between 0 and 100 on top of a set of data. Can you
it's a good question,
explain that?
No, it's a good question. The reason that we have a score is indeed to make it very easy for non-technical people to understand what's happening. It's a little bit the traffic lights that you talk about. It's when is something green, orange, and red. And we actually, I wanted the framework that we have developed, because indeed this is a screenshot of our robotic analytics framework, which is based on the raw data. We actually are comparing in a very clever way the deviation of responses of the last run with the previous runs. And the previous runs is dynamic. You can say, do you want to compare it with the previous one run or the previous 6 runs? There is a little bit of quite a bit of smart analytics. on it. But of course, it's similar what you do with APM tooling. It's when we go to different clients, we need to tune the application in the context of the application that you use your frameworks with. And when you talk about SLIs and SLOs and SR, how many of those different things are there, it's always the same. It's what are the requirements of your client, what's acceptable, and how do I visualize this with that score? And once again, I can't go into the technical details because then I actually give the framework away. Yeah, that's how it works.
Got one more question, if that's okay. Because I have to be honest, I joined late today. I wanted to see the earlier presentations where I think Kenny, you just told me there was a tutorial on Tableau. And for me, I don't use Tableau on a regular basis. How much data can it ingest actually? Because you are probably analyzing lots and lots of data. Like, is this something from an architecture perspective that you load all of this in your memory on your machine? Is this a cloud service? Just maybe some background on that. That would be great for me.
I'm extremely happy that Joey is also present. So I'm going to ask Joey to answer that one.
So, in my presentation, I have some profiled results of some Python code, which is about 1 million records. So that's quite a big chunk of data, and Tableau can handle that without any problems. Tableau is very, very good at handling large amounts of data, but if you have that data stored in the SQL database, then Tableau is as fast as your SQL database can pull it in.
Mm-hmm.
That's how Tableau manages that, and it does some smart things under the hood, which I don't totally understand how they do it, but it's definitely, it can handle a lot of data. I've pushed through a lot in the past.
Yeah, it is also, I mean, it's just also for Joey, it just depends what you're testing. If I remember a project in New Zealand when we were actually testing for a telco operator, yeah, that's totally different. It's a totally different ballgame than testing for a web-based application. And then you have millions of transactions, not a day, but maybe a minute. And yeah, then of course I wouldn't have a clue, to be honest, Andy. We need to see whenever it happens how we deal with it, because but yeah, you need to be very careful that it's scalable on that side as well. You're totally right.
Exactly. It's also how you manage your data. If you have large amounts of data and you have to structure it in a database, then you also can only keep a certain set of that raw data. If you can only keep, for example, 10 tests, or else then your calculations go to a grinding halt because you have so much data in it. And you could skimp off data and just use 3 to compare to instead of using everything. So it also depends on how big your data sets are. Like, we have always been lucky that the tests that are doing are small in throughput. That means that we can collect the raw data in larger numbers. But if you work for a telco and you have 1 million records, then then it becomes more difficult. And you just have to change your strategies on how you're going to manage that much data. Maybe you need to know concepts of SQL and that kind of stuff.
Point is really the raw data, and I think if you look at Dynatrace, that for you guys, that's also a differentiator now. That's why I really like Dynatrace as well.
Just a question, because there was a question this morning. Maybe you can answer it, Joey or Stijn, more about Tableau and connectors. Is it able to connect a time series database, like, for example, InfluxDB or something like this? Compatible with that?
I believe that's possible. If you open up Tableau, you get like a gigantic list of things that can connect to you. So it's probably in there somewhere. I can even check. Give me a second.
And while you check this, and maybe while you check this, does Tableau have a REST API where you can then also pull out the results? Like you define your queries in Tableau. Is there also a way to automate the data out of Tableau?
Yeah, you can, but that's also depending on the licensing, because we are also looking at like Steven is using Tableau Server, so that you can also define triggers and do whatever you want. So that's not just a data visualization tool, but that you also can actually make it that you can define actions like you do with your remediation, that you could do that as well. Mm-hmm. Although I still see a data analytics tool not, it's a little bit using it in a different way. But would be surprised.
I mean, the reason why I'm asking all these questions because you will see it in my presentation where I want to give you some homework.
Oh God. So I will do the homework just in time for the next physical pack, whenever that's organized.
Okay.
But yeah, maybe we should talk about that because it's indeed always awesome, those Neotys pack events. That's why we know each other. And when you are into performance testing, really putting the effort in to speak on those events, it's a very small community where we are actually all real fun people to hang out with, and the Neotys pack events are awesome to do that.
I quickly checked for you, Andreas. It's Influx is not on the list. It's not on the list.
There you go.
Okay.
But I don't know.
Because I was thinking if you have if it's compatible with a time series database, then you could also collect like data coming from Prometheus, storing like time series database. So I was starting to imagine other things in my head, but okay, I would do it. All right. So any other questions, Joey or Roman? Hi, Roman. How are you? Do you have any questions for Stijn?
Hi. No, just a comment. I think it's oh, I'm still muted. Can you hear me?
You can hear you.
All good. That's great. Well, hi to all. Also a little bit late today, but I already joined for this talk early. So actually, I think it's really cool to focus on raw data. It's the same thing that we also try to do as much as possible. Of course, it's a huge effort, and I think you found a really great way of minimizing the effort and having the most benefit of getting out of the raw data. I don't have a question. I think I have more like something that popped in my mind. Everything goes into automation. My talk is going to be about automation. So I think it would be good to have sort of indicators which would lead you to, let's say, to a hint to looking at the raw data. And we have a lot of things in statistics like standard deviation and stuff like that. So instead of, you mentioned you have the median, you have average, you have 90 percentiles, etc. I would actually suggest if we go into like CI/CD and automated performance tests to not only take one statistic metric and some indicator that tells you how your test data is actually spreading, how big is the variance. And if this one pops yellow or red, you should always make sure to have at least a look at the raw data and still have the benefits of automation. I think there will be a lot of effort in fiddling out these metrics.
You're totally right there. Right? That's also why we use the test execution score for that. I think that I made it quite clear that you need to be careful if you make your CI/CD validation too simple, like you said.
Yeah.
And that's also a point I wanted to make. So having a combination, whatever you do, we use the test execution score, but if you combine percentile with standard deviation n, that could be also suitable. It doesn't need to be as fancy like we did, but a combination of different ones and try it out. I'm always a big believer in trying it out, but then a few days look at the raw data and see how it evolves and see how successful it is and learn from what you do. But having your validation indeed too simplistic is a real danger. Because the good thing is that everything will pass. but maybe that's not what you want.
So a small note about that. I'm not supposed to say tool agnostic conference, but with Neotys 7.6, you can do that. So if the results are bad, so you can check it out with Captain or other stuff. Then you can query your API and say, hey, give me the raw data now. Because we have an API to have access to our raw data. So what Stijn has just showcased with Neotys and GUI, the physical client, do the exports manually or come online. Now you can do it through API calls. So I think what Roman described, you can achieve that.
Mm-hmm. Stijn, this is early Christmas for you.
Why do you say so? Because of what he's saying.
Yeah, because you can now get the data easily out of Neotys.
Yeah. We talked about that. We had a talk with Neotys just recently, and it's awesome. I was just a little bit confused because you both, Roman and Andy, you have a map of the world behind you. I was a little bit intrigued. Is it coincidence or did I miss something?
That is actually coincidence.
Yeah. This is actually I'm in my kitchen is here, and this is where we typically eat, and that's just a world map that we put up, Gabi and I. And we used to have we used this at the wedding for table settings. So we had different tables, and they were all assigned a country, and then there's little hearts on it that represent the countries with the table names. Yeah.
That's the best tip of the day. If you go and get married, do it this way.
For us, it's just merely decoration. So maybe, I don't know if I can turn this. I'm in the office. Say hi to Fabian.
Hey, hello.
And hi to Christian. And hi to Vienna. All right.
Right.
That's nice.